Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about something that none of us really want to deal with, and that is the death of our discus fish. The reason why I'm making this video is because in the last several months I've had several people approach me about making a video on the top 5 reasons why discus fish die. Now, one of the things I want to talk about here is making sure before you decide to go into raising discus fish that you have an absolute sense of what it takes to make sure that these beautiful creatures are capable of staying alive in an environment that you have created. And it really is up to you. 100% of it is going to be your dedication and capability of keeping these fish in an environment that is conducive to their well-being. Now, with that said, let's talk about the 5 reasons that we lose discus fish. Now, we're going to start with number 5 here and work our way down to number 1. And let's start with that number 5. But before we do that, please hit that subscribe button and also use that bell at the top there to notify you whenever we have a new video that is coming out. I really appreciate it if you would also give us a like on this one or any of the videos that you're watching. I will be leaving in the description area below some medications, videos that I think will be helpful to you, and also any other videos that I think pertain to this subject that we're going to be talking about. So getting back to this number 5, the first one here, this 5th one, is called failure to thrive. Now, what I mean by failure to thrive is a discus that is losing weight, is getting that pinched in look right above its forehead, its eye area. These are fish that are being emaciated by something, and that is always a difficult process to try to figure out. The number one reason for failure to thrive is possibly the fish is not getting nutrition that it needs. Now, the way that that can happen, and the reason why that can happen, is because you have a hierarchy in the discus world. You have fish that are at the top of their hierarchy, and you have fish that are at the bottom of the hierarchy. And what happens is, a lot of times when you're feeding your discus fish, you will see that some of these fish that are a little bit subservient to the hierarchy in the school are going to not eat first, number 1, and maybe not eat at all if they're not given the opportunity. And once you see that happening, you really need to take care of it very quickly. One of the things that I try to tell everyone is feed your discus in 2 or 3 areas in your tank. Don't put all the food in one area, kind of divide it up. That way, the more dominant of your discus cannot cover the whole tank, so that allows your lower archy fish to actually find food and consume it. And as they grow, that whole hierarchy will switch around, and as they get to know each other and they've been in the tank together long enough, that hierarchy seems to balance itself out, and everybody gets along and everybody gets to eat. So that's one of the main reasons for failure to thrive. Now, possibly you could have fish that were maybe purchased that were not 100% healthy. So this brings me to another point, and that is to make sure that your supplier is absolutely someone that you can trust. In other words, if you're buying these fish locally, watch the fish for a while, find out what they're eating, and make sure that they are eating a variety of foods and they're not just being fed something like live worms and that sort of thing, which all fish are going to eat those kinds of things, but you're not going to have that diet necessarily. In fact, black worms are even hard to find right now. You may not have that diet at home, and you really don't want that diet at home. And the reason for that is because a variety of foods is the best and most healthy way to feed your fish. So you could have a situation here where your fish were not in the best of shape before you even brought them home. So watch those fish at the store if you are buying them locally, and kind of know what's going on with them before you ever make a purchase. These fish are expensive, they're not cheap. So before you make that purchase, don't make knee-jerk reactions and knee-jerk purchases that are going to be something you're going to be sorry for later. Now, if you're buying your fish online, try to know your supplier's reputation. Make sure you're buying them from somebody that actually has a good reputation for selling quality fish and that sort of thing. And I will, as always, leave a few suppliers in my description area down below here that I think that you can trust. Now let's move on to number 4 here, and this one's a very important one, and that is external parasites. A lot of times we don't see that our fish are developing parasites until we get into a situation where it's kind of spread through the tank. Now this brings me to the number one thing that you should be always doing when you get discus or any fish, and that is quarantining these fish for 3 to 4 weeks before you put them in a community tank. Now the reason I say that is because number one, this gives you an opportunity to observe them, to see if there's any kind of diseases that are developing in the quarantine tank. If they are diseased, it's going to show up there, and it's much easier to medicate and take care of these problems before you ever put them in your community tank. That is just good practice here, and you can see if there are any external parasites on the body that are going to bring the fish down and possibly spread it through your whole tank. So be very careful about that. Make sure that you're making good observations about your fish's health as they're in the quarantine tank. Look at them closely, study them, look at their eating habits, look at their skin or their scales or their fin area and that kind of thing. Look for things that are obvious, such as parasites that are attached to the body or to the tail and those kinds of things. So again, external parasites, lesions on the body can cause a wide variety of problems, and like I said, it's so much easier to treat them in a quarantine tank than it is to treat them in a community tank and pass all of those problems on to your existing fish. Now, number 3 on my list is fungal diseases. Now, these are diseases that are not parasitical necessarily. These are confused sometimes with being parasites, and they're not. The fungal diseases are very different in a unique situation. What you can see in a fungal disease is that your fish have like white spots along their body and also along their tail, which shows up first typically. It'll show up right around usually their tail fin or their dorsal fin area, and you'll see it spread to other parts of their body. Sometimes it's just a small little white dot, not to be confused with ick or something like that, which is a true parasite, but something that just looks kind of cottony looking sometimes, or maybe it's just kind of a blurred out area of white. This can be a fungal disease that can create a lot of problems for the fish, and it's very easily treatable. And again, as I said, I will put some medication suggestions in the, or at least put some videos that I'll point you to in my catalog of videos that will help you to deal with these diseases. And it's very important to watch for these kinds of things, because fungal diseases can be problems that can last a long time. So you want to make sure that you get rid of that and you treat it for a long period of time in the quarantine tank or hospital tank before you ever introduce these fish to your other tank. Now, the nice thing about fungal diseases is sometimes they don't attack other fish in your tank, other discus in your tank. Maybe it's unique to one particular fish. I have seen fungal diseases pop up on one fish and the other fish in the tank don't get them, but it will cause problems for that particular fish, or it can be a fungus that can be spread throughout the tank. And so therefore, as I said, if you treat this in a quarantine tank and treat it with the proper medication, then you will get ahead of it, and this can be something that's really, really easy to solve a problem with. Now, number 2 on my list is gill flukes. Gill flukes are something that just really, really can be a problem that is hard to identify. And the reason for that is they're inside the gills, and the only way that you're going to see them is if your fish gets sick to the point where they're opening their gills up enough to where you see these little white specks in there. Those are flukes that can create a lot of problems for your fish and their breathing. They rely 100% on those gills to get oxygen into their body, and if the flukes are in there, they multiply very quickly, and they can easily overcome a fish and create an environment where that fish just dies suddenly. And it's not something you may ever see. So pay attention. I try to do a health check on all of my fish as I walk through in the morning, and I look at all of my tanks in my gallery. I like to look and do a health check on all of my fish, see if anybody's behaving differently, if anyone's struggling with breathing. There are signs that are right there in front of you that are going to give you some idea that your fish is sick. Be careful to look into those gills. If you see their gills flaring out, and sometimes you'll even see some of these gill flukes right on the very edge of the gill, and it's very obvious. It's like a white area that the fish will tend to scrub up against a rock or a piece of wood in your tank, or even sometimes just leaves on a plant, trying to get rid of this thing because it's irritating them. It's not necessarily itching them, but it's something that's definitely irritating, and they're trying to dislodge it. So be careful to pay attention to that and understand that these can be treated, again, in a quarantine tank or hospital tank. And the medications, like I said, I'm not going to get into medications in this video, but I am going to leave that in the description down below as to the kinds of medications, point you to a video in my catalog, as I said, that is going to help you to identify some of these diseases and give you an idea of what you might use to kill gill flukes and to take care of these other problems as well. So my last one here is the most important one, and one that you're never going to see because it's internal, and that is internal parasites. And this is a real serious problem that people don't address enough, and that is worms or parasites in the digestive tract that are either robbing the fish of its ability to get nutrition and that sort of thing. And you have to really wonder sometimes when your fish looks emaciated. And this goes back to the first one that we talked about. When your fish is starting to look emaciated, it's a possibility that they do have some internal stuff going on that is robbing them of proper nutrition and a way of using the food that they're taking in to help them grow and be healthy. If you're seeing your fish acting funny, if they're being very picky about their food, or they're not eating at all, this is a good sign that there are some parasites internally that are bothering them. And the way to address that is to deworm your fish. Anytime you get new fish, I would suggest to you that you deworm them, and that would be during the quarantine process. Now that would be metronidazole or something like that would take care of any kind of internal parasites like hexamia and stuff like that. So it's very important that you do this. A lot of people would suggest that you do this every 4 months or so, deworm all the fish in your tank. But if you're not adding new fish to your tank and your tank has been set up and established for a long period of time, unless you see something going on where your fish are starting to get a little thin and that kind of thing, I would suggest to you that you don't have to do this worming on a regular basis. Now, there are people out there that will argue with me on that and suggest that I'm wrong about that. But the bottom line is that I firmly believe that if you deworm them once and you get rid of it, if they're eating and you can feed it to them, the metronidazole, roll it into their food, that is the best way to deal with it. Otherwise, you have to treat the whole tank by putting the metronidazole in the tank in hopes that they get this into their system. It doesn't always work. The best situation is to have fish that are actively eating and will digest the food that's got the metronidazole in it. You're going to have to sort of make this food up and make it work for you. But it's really the classic way to get rid of any kind of internal parasites that your fish might have. Now, I hope I covered a lot of territory for you today and you got something out of this, because it's very, very helpful to have some of these tools to work with and an understanding of what your fish might need before they ever go into the community tank, or if something, God forbid, happens in your community tank, you have some idea of what is going on. Identifying diseases is probably one of the most important things you can do with discus fish, or any fish at all. I would suggest to you that, as I said earlier, go through your tanks every morning and look at your fish just to do a health check on them. You don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but look at them. See if there's any unusual behaviors going on or anything like that. You know your fish after you've had them for a while, and it's really easy to identify when you're having a problem. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. I've been sick and I've not been in great health here in the last couple of months, and I apologize that I haven't been able to spend more time making videos, but I'm hoping that as I'm getting better here that people will come back to the channel and spend a little more time watching my videos. I hope that we're offering you stuff that's really helpful. Again, thank you for joining me, and we will see you on the next one. I will leave a couple of videos that I'm going to suggest to you at the end of this, and that will point you in the right direction to things that are very much associated with what we talked about today. We're going to pick out some videos for you to watch at the end of this, suggestions. I hope that you'll take a look at those. Until we see you again, thank you again for joining me, and we will see you on the next one.